Good morning, everybody. We're pleased to be back to present another great program. You're going to hear the word plan a lot today. It's been stuck in my head all week as we were getting ready for today's program. So let me just talk about a few other things that are going on before we get started, and I turn it over to Lloyd Rawls to talk. We're hearing about a number of outbreaks in some of our dealers, and I'm sorry to hear that news and that COVID is continuing to impact your day-to-day business. As you know, the association is pushing hard to get dealership personnel moved up on the priority list for vaccinations. And as soon as we have more information about that, we'll be sharing it with all of you. In the meantime, it is really imperative that you continue to follow the safety protocols you put in place back in July when the guidance came out from the Department of Health. So please make sure that you're following that guidance, you're enforcing that guidance with your staff as it remains in place today. In addition to that, as you know, the association is continuing to closely monitor legislation and regulatory activity of what's going on and what could and could not impact your dealership operations. One of the items that the association specifically requested was to extend the 5-day rule. When we spoke to DMV, as you know, they came on board and they granted our request, but only for partner dealers at this time. So we are continuing to work on that and trying to expand it further for all dealers. And as we get through that, we will keep you informed of that as well. The legislative session continues through the second week of June, so watch for our weekly updates on that information. Everybody who's attending today should have received an email from Kelsey this morning with an attachment that the Rawls Group provided. There is so much information and good information in that publication. It was just too hard to break it out in slides. So you will see that that's going to be referred to as we go through the program. So if you didn't get it or you need it, please let us know. Send us an email. Contact the association and we'll make sure we'll get this additional publication over to you. Let me just talk about a few ground rules for today's program. I'm going to be monitoring the questions and answers. I cannot see the chat box and I can't see if you raise your hand. So the only way for you to get the questions in is for you to type them into the chat, into the Q&A box. I will monitor them and we'll answer them. I will interrupt Lloyd as he goes through the program and he knows I'm going to do that. So he'll be prepared when the time comes. The webinar is being recorded. And of course, this is our website is up on your screen now. This one was created during the coronavirus pandemic. It does not require a login or a password. So it is readily available. There are a wealth of resources here, not just on COVID. All of the webinars we've done since last March are housed in the library on the site. So let's get to today's program. And I know that many of you attending today have family owned and operated dealerships and face sibling rivalry issues and have not thought or have not thought about what type of family legacy you intend to leave. Fear can obviously be one of those things that prevents you from having a succession plan. The Rawls Group is certainly here to help and they will get us through these complex issues and talk about those today. So today's program is all about planning. As that word just keeps coming up. So we are very pleased to have our presenter, Lloyd Rawls, who is the founder and chairman and succession advisor of the Rawls Group, was a company completely dedicated only to succession planning. So with that brief introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Lloyd to get us started.
Thank you, Susan. Lloyd? Thank you. My name is Lloyd. I'm with the Rawls Group, and we are family business succession planners. You may have heard about us. You may have read one of my books. You may have come by NADA. We've been around for 48 years. We haven't seen it all, but we've seen a great deal of the fun, exciting, and perplexing experiences that evolve in family-owned businesses and notably automobile dealerships. We have well over 500 automotive clients in all 50 states and several foreign countries. On a good day, I'm referred to as Dr. Merlot. On a bad day, when the fun is removed from dysfunctional, I'm also referred to as blunt, insensitive, a troublemaker. I can assure you, we do not create problems within succession planning, but there are a few occasions when we do identify them. And our role is to help our clients address those. My proposition to you today is that succession planning builds and protects value. My proposal is that you address the PPP of succession planning and proactively build the value of your business and enhance the welfare of all those who are associated with your business. Now, I don't have to think too deeply to remind you that these are exciting times. We've just had a political transition. We've been in the midst of COVID, and we're hearing all this little talk about electric cars, and we're concerned about future service departments and manufacturers getting into the retail business. Last year, most of you sold fewer cars, performed fewer ROs, and in many cases, made more money. Plus, you received some serious relief money from our government. Ideally, last year, you discovered your business is valuable. And in many cases, the most valuable asset that you could have. And I would anticipate that many of you have been thinking about succession planning. Some of you have been thinking about sale. I can't see your smiling faces, but I assume all of those who are listening represent the full spectrum of those who have a vested interest in succession planning, which include owners, family members, key managers, vendors, attorneys, accountants, and the factory representative. I'm going to present to you my thesis to one and all, and my contention is that these family businesses are the most valuable asset that you have, and they're in all likelihood more valuable than any substitute asset you could have through the achievement of sale. The average dealership returns about 20% on market, more or less, depending on franchise, location, and operator. There are also some very lucrative affiliated benefits to owning a dealership, such as reinsurance, the real estate, P&C insurance, vacations, and other opportunities. Irrespective of the return, dealerships are being sold due to a diversity of reasons, such as death, retirement, disillusionment, fear of the economy, fear of electrification, fear of the manufacturers taking over retail, no successor, whatever. It's an exciting time. And the fact is that the sale of your dealership is a viable succession option when sale is the most practical and logical byproduct of a succession planning initiative. However, upon the sale, the value of an average dealership is discounted by 33%. And I'm sure any of you who have sold one have experienced the commissions, the closing cost, the discounts on your FF&E, capital gains tax, state income tax, recapture of deferred taxes, including LIFO and chargebacks. So the sale of a business can create a major revelation that your business was not worth what you thought it was. To further complicate matters, the reinvestment of sale proceeds becomes both an emotional and a financial challenge. It's an emotional challenge because most of you are not experts at alternate investments. You don't have a great deal of experience in the stock market, and that volatility, which is the basis for making profits in the stock market, is something that scares the average person who has liquidated their primary asset and is looking to create financial security. Consequently, after the sale of a dealership, it's normal and customary, even prudent, to take a defensive-minded approach and to be alert for the next Bernie Madoff or whatever might be uh, of great concern to you. And consequently, the returns on a dealership, on the sales proceeds of a dealership, generally equate to about 7% on half of the sales proceeds. And you might say, why half? Well, generally, upon sale, some of that cash proceeds is directed elsewhere to family members, to key managers, etc. It's been our experience that about half of the proceeds get reinvested. And if you figure half of it's getting reinvested, then the net proceeds or the net return on the dealership asset has dropped from 20% to 3.5%. Therefore, from a purely financial perspective, cash flow and lifestyle, the sale of a dealership can be, and I emphasize the word can be, a real step down. Now, if you want to be compelled to accept the emotional and the financial challenges of this step down, then have a sale be forced upon you and not be prepared for it. But I assure you that regardless of the contingencies and the concerns that you might be facing, there is a way for you to deal with the succession of your dealership to include the sale, the succession to preserve the value. And if the continuity of the dealership is not realistic, then the sale to extract as much value as you can. Now, with regard to the value proposition, addressing the multiple contingencies that can in fact impact the value of your dealership is what we call succession planning. Succession planning would address the continuation of your success through family members or key managers. Succession planning would also address the preparation of your business and your personal assets to assure the continuation of your lifestyle, even if other factors beyond finance lead you to decide that sale is the appropriate option. Succession planning also addresses all issues impacting the continuation of your family's welfare and the welfare of those who have helped you become successful over your career. Succession planning is an investment in your financial security and the welfare of those around you. Now, to share with you a story, you might ask, what kind of succession planning could dictate a sale? Well, we worked with a family going back over 30 years. They initially owned and operated 2 stores when we'd met them, and they had a son and a son-in-law who were working with them as aspiring successors. Over the years of our relationship, they added dealerships. The patriarch passed away, and the son and son-in-law developed what I would classify as a destructive rivalry. Over the years, it became apparent that neither the son nor the son-in-law could operate the expanded business of 8 dealerships. We knew the sale was probable, so we advised the matriarch to minimize debt, don't choose LIFO, and in lieu of jets, boats, and multiple homes, develop income-producing assets outside of the business. The state of the business about 5 years ago was 8 impressively profitable dealerships. Unfortunately, we had revolving leadership due to the bickering between the son and son-in-law. And the organization was teetering on coming off of good performance into mediocre, and it looked like the rivalry was even going to take it further. My recommendation to the client was to either partition the stores or sell them. Mom said that she had no confidence that either her son or son-in-law could operate 4 stores. So we sold the stores, dealerships, and real estate, proceeds of about 120 million, and net after proceeds and chargebacks of about 85 million. Fortunately, we had developed through our planned investment about 30 million of income producing assets outside of the business. We also had minimized the cost of the sale, and we had actually found someone beyond a broker, someone we knew who bought the dealerships. And after the sales, each of the children had about 50 million in trust. Their earnings rate, because we had pursued investments early, was much better than the 7%. There was no major change in lifestyle. Mom had the peace of mind that her employees would not go down with the ship. And she had the peace of mind that her son and son-in-law would stop bickering over nonsense. And it was a very effective succession planning endeavor that involved the sale of the dealerships. So let's take a moment to look a little deeper into the components of your business. Although highly productive, your dealership is a complex hybrid asset. It's comprised of animate, inanimate, and social components. The inanimate components are your franchise agreements, your inventories, your working capital, your equipment, technology, facilities, etc. Your animate are the managers, employees, customers, vendors. And then there's a social component relating to family, partners, and the community in which you're involved. All of these factor together to create the opportunity for extraordinary performance or pathetic dysfunction. The optimum interaction of these strange bedfellows in a family business is makes it one of the most productive businesses from a potential standpoint on the planet. And frankly, that's why the publics and private equities are really out to buy your business. They want to join your fraternity. As you may have seen, they thought at first they could duplicate your performance, but they recognized that hired hands working only for money and not for the legacy of a family could not duplicate the performance of a family culture. Their plan today is to pick off those dealerships that you become disillusioned with and try to achieve 60% of what your potential is. And 60%, frankly, is fine with Wall Street. That makes their multiples look very great. And as some of you may have found, if you're earning more than 3% net to sales and a public wants to buy your store, they won't even pay you a multiple above that because they know they can't reproduce it. I mention this because the rush of these public companies should be validation to you that your store is valuable. It's complex, but it's a highly valuable business. And hopefully that will provide some motivation to you for succession planning. The value of your unique amalgamation of these inanimate and animate factors depends on the quality of your operations, the quality of your people, and the depth of your commitment to succession planning. However, I've got to tell you that there's no such thing as a free lunch. We all know that. And there's no such thing that succession planning is easy. It's demanding. Frankly, it's hard work. And it's the kind of things that I've heard compared to sticking your hand into a garbage disposal. But it's worth the price. The goal is worth seeking because the pursuit of continued success is in the best interest of you, your family, and all those who've contributed to your success. And no one can achieve the kind of success with that asset more than you. To give you another example of a story, a succession client that dates back 20 to 30 years was a client. I'll refer to him as Jack. He was really a great operator. Unfortunately, like many of us, he was not the perfect husband or dad. He divorced and remarried. First, he remarried the business, and then after a few years, he did marry a nice young lady who, of course, infuriated his first wife, who poisoned the well with his son and daughter. So it was quite a dysfunctional family environment, but nevertheless, it was quite a productive business environment. He recruited some terrific key managers. He did not have a vision for family succession. His children would not hardly have dinner with him. He affirmed his key managers with golden handcuffs, allowing the very special key managers to become minority shareholders. We developed a contingency succession bridge with these very special key managers that provided an internal succession strategy in the event of his death. He did not want to sell to a public company. He wanted to sell internally. And then he died, which was sort of a test program. And the net effect was that his surviving spouse had ample cash. His children, in their separate trust, also had ample cash. By virtue of maintaining minority ownership with these key managers, they also had income producing assets that Wall Street could not duplicate. The key managers were highly appreciative, and they were fulfilled in their new opportunities, and they started expanding their stores. And as they would go expand and find new opportunities, the family trust would invest with them. And today, the family trust that's supporting his wife and his children has very generous cash because of the cash sales. It also has these minority interests in the dealerships. It also has the real estate, and it has returns that are far beyond what Wall Street can offer. Everyone involved in that is in their comfort zone. The key managers, the employees, the vendors, the family, they're all happy. And the manufacturers are happy because these dealerships are performing above benchmark in every way, as opposed to being in a run by a public company. This may seem like a complex plan to have a succession bridge involving key managers, but not to worry. I assure you there's a plan for you, one that will work for you. Succession planning doesn't put you in a box. It tries to find your box. All of you are thinking about succession planning. All of you are thinking about the continued success of your business. Some of you unconsciously, some of you consciously. Some as dictated by evolving circumstances, insolent children, medical circumstances, or whatever. And some of you are pragmatically addressing this as a team. I want to congratulate all of you because even visiting with me today for this 45 minutes is a succession planning investment. And I guarantee you that you're going to hear something today that long-term is going to add value to your business. It's going to help support and provide a greater foundation for the welfare of all those who are associated with your business and contributed to your success. So to break this succession down into a more granular consideration, here's an absolute proposal that I have for you. And that is, for each contingency that is impacting the continuation of your success, for each contingency that you address, you will increase the value of your most powerful asset, your dealership. Now, by address, I'm not saying that you have to resolve the issue. But what I am saying that you do have to acknowledge that you've got the issue and that you will stay engaged in considering the alternative ways to address the issue. I mean, I may not be the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I'm tenacious. And my credo for succession planning is that if we stay engaged, we don't have to be overly smart. We just have to be diligent. And the answer to our challenges, the answer to our issues will ultimately come to us. It'll jump right into our lap. Now, it would be reasonable and certainly supportive of this presentation to ask, what are the succession planning issues impacting the value of my dealership?
So before you go on, Lloyd, let me just stop you for 1 second. I just want to clarify a couple of things. And that is, the succession planning that you're talking about is the same, or is it the same if the dealer is planning to pass the dealership on to their children, or if they're planning to sell it to someone outside the family? So does this how do you consider, or do you have to consider how you're going to pass on the dealership, whether it's going to remain in the family or go to an outside buyer?
To answer your question, Susan, the answer is yes. Now, that's the simple answer because you gave me multiple contingencies of if I want to sell, if I want to pass it to my kids.
Right.
Profoundly and fundamentally, succession planning builds value. And succession planning embraces a broad spectrum of issues, which may include, hey, I don't have any successors. I don't have a key manager I trust. My health is not good. I'm not in good standing with the manufacturers. I mean, all of these issues are succession planning issues that impact the continuation of success. And it's a value proposition, because when you look at value of a dealership, it's a snapshot. But anybody who is interested in the value of your dealership, whether it be your children, whether it be your managers, or whether it be a buyer, they're not going to look at a snapshot. They want to see the motion picture. What is this going to look like over the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years of me being involved in it, me supervising it, me running it, me owning it? So succession planning covers all of those contingencies. And in each case, you approach it differently. I want to give it to my kids. I don't have any kids. I want to think about my key managers. I don't have any kids or key managers. I want to sell it. You approach it a little differently, but it's the same offering. How do I make it? How do I create the most value? And how do I create a business that is sustainable, that's resilient, and that can predictably perform at or above benchmark? Now, with regard to those issues, I just want to let you know that Trump and Biden were not the only ones to come up with a PPP program. The Rawls Group has done it too. And we define these as the issues, Susan, that you were referring to. And it's basically the predictable, the probable, and the possible issues that could impact the continuation of your success through the next generation of owners and managers. Now, when I say owners, I'm referring to, hey, it might be the next generation being your family, or it might be someone who wants to buy your store and you want to extract the most value you could from it. Now, you've been provided a handout that shows you these things that we've just classified. I mean, we've been at this a while, and this is a theory of ours that's been around a long time. It's just received a little highlight lately since Trump and Biden stole my PPP name. But the predictable issues are, your death, your attorney telling you that probate is no big deal. Uh, somebody stealing from you, that's predictable. And if you don't think that's a succession planning issue, I've got a story on that one too, because it'll sure kill value. Uh, Taxation will challenge your motivation. That's predictable. You will entertain selling. If you're human, you're going to entertain selling. An inability to, your inability to operate the dealership, these things are becoming far more sophisticated, far more technically demanding. And in many cases, it's just not as much fun as it used to be. Another predictable is a partner's death or inability or incapacity. A factory rep being transferred. Good gosh, how often does that happen? Your best friend, he was going to help you do all these things, and all of a sudden he's working for another manufacturer. Uh, None of your children are in the dealership. Your children will be approach the business differently you do. I mean, they see management, they see leadership differently you do. These are all predictable things, and you can go down your list, the list we provided, and then we transition to what we would call the probable.
Well, before you do that, let me just raise the issue on the franchise law in New York.
Yes.
As you and I were talking about before the program came on. And that is New York's franchise law, which everybody should have a copy of this guide it's a copy of the law we put into this pamphlet so that everybody should have it. If you don't have it, there is a specific reference to the unlawful denial of the transfer to the successor. It's on page 31, and if you need help getting this, we'll be glad to provide it. We'll put that up. We'll add it to the website when we put the webinar up. But there is a section in the New York franchise law that does apply to what Lloyd is talking about when it comes to predictability. At least you know the law going in.
Yes, the most states now have reasonably friendly, minimally compatible franchise laws that prevent the manufacturers from throwing their weight around. They still have plenty of leverage if you don't consider them to be your worst enemy. If they are considered to be a partner, a friend, the franchise law is really in an asset to you. But you've got to perform. You've got to be respectful to their requirements regarding change of ownership. The various things that we all encounter in our daily activities in succession planning. So we looked at some of the predictable issues and then the probable issues. Yeah, it's probable you'll never voluntarily retire. We'll have to carry you out toes up. And you might say, no, I'm going to retire, but being a car dealer is too much doggone fun for a lot of guys to give up. And most of the social environment is around them. And I say ladies as well. The social environment is almost addictive. And the thought of one of the greatest fears of selling is, what am I going to do socially when I no longer have all you great friends to hang around and go to these conventions and the 20 groups and all those kinds of things. Another issue is you'll die believing that having a successor dealer nominee is a secure succession position. Well, being a nominee does not make you president. As a nominee, you've got to go through the election. You got to go through the vetting. And if you think that having a nominee is really going to get your child or your key manager right into the throne room where they can become the successor dealer, then you need to rethink that, because that's not going to happen. And one of the biggest propositions of the manufacturers is that you do think that, because if you give them leverage when it comes to succession, they will take it and they will beat you over the head with it. And one of the leverages is for you to think that because you have a successor dealer nominee, that the succession of your dealership is secure, it's not in question. You will not be motivated to do planning until you have to. I mean, that's very probable. The reason I'm talking to you today is I'm trying to get you to do this when you don't have to, when you've got runway, when you can start addressing these issues that will impact the value of your business. It's also probable that your kids want your job, will want your job. But they don't want to get grimy, and they don't want to go through all the steps that you went through. And the reality is that they can become a dealer, an effective dealer, without having to go through all the steps that you went through. And for you to think that they've got to do it the same way you did it, that's a handicapped method of thinking. The business has changed, and preparation to be a dealer has changed as well. And then we've got those possible issues. And man, this covers the spectrum of anything could happen. It's possible that you'll transition to business to your successors, have no financial security concerns, and have no estate planning concerns. Now that's possible. It is rare, but it's possible. It's also possible that your successors will joyfully agree to continue paying you and your wife and all the dividends and all the compensation you've always been receiving, so that you can continue in your retirement to live off the business and be happy thereafter. I mean, that's possible, but it's rare, because kids will ultimately say, well, why should I be paying dad all that money? He's not doing anything. I mean, why should I be paying mom what I paid dad, but dad's now passed away? And here's another good possible one, that you will not think that your capital loans have a due on death clause. Now, read the fine print. And if you want to have some estate excitement, be highly leveraged and sit down with a banker in your estate and him to say, okay, we're going to have to renegotiate this loan when you've got all these years remaining on your loan. And he says, it's due on death. We can renegotiate anytime we want to. So, we might debate whether these issues are predictable, whether they're probable or they're possible. And by the way, this list keeps expanding. I've been at this 48 years, and this is not the entire list. Some of them are not really good for publication. I mean, some of them are pretty kinky, but anything can happen in a family business environment. I'm just demonstrating to you here that there are a lot of contingencies. We break them down, and then you have to evaluate how vulnerable you could be to these. But I would say that we haven't seen it all, because commonly I'm saying you would have to work to create the bizarre situation we just encountered. But these do, I think, reflect the mainstream of the contingencies you're going to be impacted by. I'd be pleased to offer any comments or reflect on any contingency that you find that's not on our list. I think the biggest point I want to make to you is that if you address these issues, it will build value in your business. A predictable issue. Let me give you an example. One of those issues said that your attorney will tell you that probate is no big deal. Well, outside the automobile industry, we had a client who was an extraordinarily large rancher, They had tens of thousands of acres of ranch land, and their attorney told them that they did not need to put that land in a revocable trust. And I challenged the attorney, and he absolutely said that advised his client not to put it in a revocable trust. And this goes back 35, 40 years ago. Well, about 15, 20 years ago, our client died. And I went to the funeral, and I'm telling you, walking away from the graveyard, all three of her children, it was a lady, approached me independently and said, Lloyd, I'd like to come have a chat with you. I'd like to, and I said, well, fine, anytime I'll come over to your house. I said, no, I want to come to your office. Well, in the following weeks, each of those children came and revealed to me a great grievance they had with one of the other children. And what occurred because of this estate being an open estate and not being in a trust is that the bickering on of these three children over this ranch land, how it was divided, who got the homestead, who got the road frontage, the bickering over that went into court, and it took 10 years to settle it. And it's predictable that your attorney will tell you that probate is no big deal. Well, it was a big deal in that situation. Another problem.
Before you go on, I'm sorry, I'm going to just stop you there for a second because we have a question on that very subject, which I'm sure you're going to have something interesting to say. So the attendee is asking, how do you keep a family together when there are only a few members of the family in the business and the others feel slighted by the success of the siblings who are in the business?
That's a common question, and it's one that we deal with regularly. And to lead off, there's no silver bullet for harmony and kumbaya within a family. Families are an exciting environment. Everybody listening knows that. You grew up in one, and now you have your own. And there's a lot of competition within families. It's just, that's the way it works in the backyard. That's the way it works in the swimming pool. And that's how you compare your kids' grades. I mean, there's competition within families. And sometimes it gets out of control, and there can be rivalry. And rivalry is fundamentally not good. And the reason it's not good is rivalry does not focus on what you're doing. It focuses on the negative impact of what somebody else is doing. And the only real anecdote I can give you to that is open and forthright communication and discussion, and the establishment of some fundamental policies, some fundamental values of the family, the communication of those, one of which being is to the laborer goes the spoils. That being that if you decide to join the business and if you devote your career to the business, then you will be rewarded for that commensurate with the business. And I can tell you that in this case, the fact that Johnny is in the business and he's doing better than maybe Susie, who's married and her husband is not in a family business, maybe Johnny's doing a lot better, but the reverse occurs. And some people literally in family businesses are not doing as well because they have devoted their life to the family business. The only resolution, the only preventive method you can have is to say, these are the values we live by. This is the rules, our family policies. These are our family procedures as to compensation, and everybody has an opportunity. And if you want to be involved, that's great. If you don't want to be involved, then that's okay too. I don't believe there's any silver bullet as to how to resolve that. It's a function of trying to achieve communication, and it's trying to help people understand that we have equal opportunity, but we do not have equal benefits, because those who are contributing are going to receive more benefits than those who are not contributing. I hope that provided an answer. Susan, did you have another question?
I don't, not from an attendee right now, but let me just raise this issue that I think would be helpful for the dealers. At what point in your career, at what point in running a dealership would you want to start the succession planning? Is it something that you're going to visit on a yearly basis? Is it something you have a plan and you stick to the plan? How would you recommend going about it?
Well, as I mentioned before, everyone's doing succession planning who has a business. They're thinking about the continuation of success. That is succession planning. And if you're 35 years old and you just started your business, you're thinking about it. Now, that doesn't mean you need to call your attorney and accountant together and get a succession planner and say, okay, how can we really address some of these most important contingencies? But you're doing succession planning. Now, as you grow older and as your business expands, then you have people who are depending upon you. And we basically call it the stewardship responsibility, that you have a contingency plan at all times. I mean, if you've convinced people that they should devote their life to your success, then it's our belief that you should apply a reasonable amount of effort to not dropping them in the grease if something happens to you. So when is a reasonable time to bring that attorney and that accountant together? Well, it has a lot to do with how successful you are, how many employees you have, and how old you are. But certainly by the time you're 50 years old, you ought to have a drafted plan or a vision as to what would happen in the event of the predictable, the probable, or the possible contingencies that apply to you.
Well, it sounds like a wise advice, and I think that you've provided some really great direction for our members today. And if you were going to give them their key takeaway, would it be to write down their succession plan, or to just continue operating and having that succession plan without formal implementation?
Well, the key takeaway is that for each continuation or each contingency to the continuation of your business that you can address, you increase the value of your most important asset, your family business. And you start with a vision, and then you develop a vision into a plan. Now, the difference between a vision and a plan is that a plan is communicated. And you might say, well, heck, I don't want to share my thinking with my kids, my managers, and things like that. I mean, they're just going to challenge me. Well, that's how the process works. Because if you're thinking in a vacuum, it's the perfection of stupid. You need to bring others into your environment to help you understand if your vision is realistic, if you've considered the contingencies, if you've considered, some things are right in front of your nose, you just don't see them. And that's when the planning begins, because you've started to communicate it. You've created dialogue. People are challenging you. They're supporting you. They're encouraging you. The succession planning imperative is teamwork. And when you can bring a team together, that's when you are going to impact the value of your business the most.
Sounds great. Well, Lloyd, I think that this was extraordinarily helpful. Of course, Lloyd's contact information is up on the screen. He is available to answer your questions further beyond this, what we could do here at this webinar, but this was extremely informative. I think you opened a lot of people's eyes. It's not a subject we address too often here at the association, so we really appreciate your taking the time. Kendall, thank you for putting this together. Let's see, we got another thank you for the presentation from our attendees. So again, I think this was great. I think it was very informative, and thank you both for all your hard work in putting this together. Let me just talk very briefly about what's coming up next week. We have another subject that we haven't presented before to my knowledge, and the program is going to be, I have no clue what my Google My Business profile looks like, tips and tricks to optimize your Google My Business profile and improve your search results. So that's going to be interesting. We'll hear from Digital Airstrike on that program. So with that, everybody have a good week, stay safe, and we'll see you back here next week at 11 o'clock. Thanks, everyone.